President Donald Trump says his objectives in the Iran war may not fully match those of Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. Take a listen in to what President had to say.
Earlier, are you speaking with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and are their objectives the same in terms of ending the war?
I think they might be a little different, I guess. They're a different country than we are. But he will tell you there's never been a power like the power of the United States. I built our military in my first term.
Well, this is the first time that Trump has admitted that US and Israel may differ in their endgame on Iran. The current campaign against Iran is the first joint Israeli-American war. It was in the month of June last year that Israel had launched attacks against Iran that US assisted with a single set of strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. Well, until now, Washington and Tel Aviv have presented the war as a united campaign against Iran, but signs of divergence are now emerging. One key difference reported earlier is about the targets. US has yet to hit Iran's oil infrastructure. The closest US has come is hitting military targets in the crucial Kurg Island and then issuing a warning. But Israel has already reportedly targeted oil facilities and strategic infrastructure outside Iran. White House is wary that the strikes risk wider escalation and global oil shocks as well. Trump has repeatedly said that US is nearing victory in Iran. In fact, according to Axios report, at a recent G7 meeting, Trump claimed that Iran is about to surrender. He has also signaled that he would be happy with Venezuela-style regime change. Meanwhile, a US-friendly leader from within Trump has also said that US is running out of targets to hit. Israel, however, has said that it has several targets in mind and its offensive will continue. That is, till all the objectives are achieved. Netanyahu has clearly said that he wants a complete regime change in Iran. Another key difference is emerging on Lebanon, where Israel is striking Hezbollah camps. A recent report by Axios claims that Israel is planning massive ground invasion of Lebanon. This could be the largest ground invasion of its northern neighbor since 2006, which is aimed at dismantling Hezbollah infrastructure south of the Litani River. Even as the Trump administration backs Israel's Lebanon offensive, it is pushing to limit the damage to the Lebanese state while urging direct Israel-Lebanon talks on a post-war agreement. And joining us live on the broadcast is Jane Kennan-Mont, CEO, United Nations Association UK. Appreciate you joining us on the broadcast. Now, Trump claims that military targets on Kurg Island have been totally obliterated, while Iranian media says that no oil infrastructure has been damaged. If that weren't the case, how much of the attack is a blow for Iran, given that the island handles roughly 90% of Iran's crude exports?
Well, it's certainly a big strategic target, but at this point, the Iranian system has gone into this extreme survival mode where the thing that they are most concerned about is how much damage they can inflict on the US and on the rest of the world to try to A, survive, and B, if they do survive, prevent themselves from being attacked ever again. So the calculations are very, very different, and they will be focused more on what damage they can do in return than on anything else.
Back to you again. First up, let's also listen in to that statement coming in from President Donald Trump, where he's for the very first time spoken about the objective of US and the Israeli forces.
Earlier, are you speaking with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and are their objectives the same in terms of ending the war?
I think they might be a little different, I guess. They're a different country than we are. But he will tell you there's never been a power like the power of the United States. I built our military in my first term.
All right, so President Donald Trump has just stated that the United States and Israel may have different objectives in their military operations against Iran. How would you analyze these statements coming in from Trump?
Well, I think that's right. I think first and foremost, Trump is probably quite aware that this war that was initiated by the US and Israel is not popular in the US. But by contrast, it is popular in Israel. It enjoys widespread public support, even though many Israelis have their doubts about Benjamin Netanyahu as a leader. There is a deep sense in Israeli society that they couldn't tolerate living in the region with the Iranian political system that it has. Whereas for the US, at the end of the day, it's very far away from Iran, and there is a limit to what Iran can really directly do to the US. It's also about the costs for the region. You know, the US has an alliance with Israel, but it also cares a lot about the Gulf states. And we know that Trump personally has a lot of interest in a prosperous Gulf where he wants himself and his family to be able to do a lot of business. I think for Israel, unfortunately, they have no confidence in any regional or international security architecture except for this kind of scorched earth policy of seeking to defeat their enemies militarily. And that comes at a huge cost for the rest of the Middle East, now including the previously stable Gulf states.
Yes. Jane, just to continue with the statements that have been coming in from President Trump, he'd even mentioned earlier that U.S. Navy will be providing security to the tankers that pass through the Strait of Hormuz, but he did not give any definite timeline as to when that would exactly happen. Talk to us about, can we really expect U.S. Navy escorting those tankers passing through the vital route?
It's not clear they really are preparing for this, but it was noticeable that when Donald Trump, over the course of the last week, has made a few statements that suggest that things might get better, then you've actually seen the markets respond to that. I think that's quite interesting. When he says something optimistic, it can directly influence the oil price and the market. So I would guess that he's probably trying to build confidence without that necessarily meaning that those military realities are going to follow. But we are seeing the US dispatching now several hundred Marines to the region who will take 2 more weeks to get there. So that's raising questions about what they are intended to do.
Yes. James, this last question before we let you go, talking about the United Nations Security Council having adopted that resolution that condemned Iran's attack in the Gulf. This is when Iran had also called on the UNSC to condemn the attacks by US and Israel. All said and done, what role can we expect, concrete role, so as to say, that UNSC can play amid the hostilities we are seeing at present?
Well, I think this resolution has really illustrated the limitations of the Security Council, because everybody knows that so many resolutions are either going to be vetoed by the US or by Russia. So fair enough, on one hand, there was a widespread international consensus that Iran shouldn't be attacking the Gulf states. That's bad for the global economy. But it is also absurd that such a resolution on this Middle East war and the deep Middle East crisis can pass without mentioning the US and Israel attacking Iran, or indeed Iran attacking Israel in response. It does show how the Security Council has become really unable to deal with conflicts when they involve these major powers. And since more and more conflicts do involve these major powers, there will be growing calls for the Security Council either to reform, to change its membership and to stop using the veto so much, or at least to show some restraint, to not be so ready and willing to abuse the veto to suppress the will of the rest of the world.
Important point that you mentioned about the veto power, Jane. That's all the time we had. Appreciate you speaking to WION.